This is the Team Objection podcast for September 19th, 2019. Been a long day. We're off to a terrible start already. I'm not going to even have much of a voice. It's going to be bad, but
we got to start over.
Okay.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
September 19th, 2019, episode 407. It's the core crew again. Might be that way for a little bit here, but we have a different subject to tackle. It's not basketball related almost at all. I think one name might come up. Stick around. It's not going to be basketball. It's not going to be like a niche video game. It's just going to be a globally acceptable topic, if not the most globally acceptable topic.
We got to get back to topics like these. We got to prove we can do them. The OG crew. We can talk about more than just basketball.
True.
I think
everyone in the world, literally everyone in the world, could have an opinion on this topic.
Yeah, and should, to some extent. Not like it's an important topic we're going to reach, but just it's something you can think about and be like, I have an opinion.
I heard Michelle got picked up by the circus.
The circus is still a thing?
In Portland especially. Yeah. And she was like, wow, it's so hipster.
Yeah.
I'm in.
She got picked up by the Neutral Milk Circus.
So it might be a little while.
It's so hated that I like it.
Yes. You know how the circuses are doing so well because of their beloved treatment of animals in 2019?
Really, everything about that Michelle just loves. Abusing animals.
Bearded ladies really don't play that well in 2019.
Yeah.
Is there anything about the circus you can still do?
Clowns? Clowns are like much more accepted as like scary things, I feel like these days.
Yeah.
They were always kind of scary, but now we have like the biggest horror movie of all time has a horror clown.
Look at this. Okay, it's gone
there
now.
He goes.
For the visual people, the people on YouTube, you could just see behind the scenes a moment there. Michaela's empty
shrank.
chair.
Yeah.
Just made the internet hiccup. It's fine. We're still here.
I would say the animals, but then they abuse all of them. So it's like, what? The clown car?
No midgets. That's definitely a no.
Yeah.
What the hell can you do? Trapeze? Trampoline?
Trapeze, that's about it.
Trapeze. And that's still cool, but like, I feel like it's been co-opted. You don't go to the circus for trapeze. You go to like Cirque du Soleil.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is awesome.
That might be part of why Barnum and Bailey kind of went out of business.
Cirque du Soleil is basically a fancy circus.
Kind of, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
A sexier circus.
That's true too. With better music. With like a lot better. I don't like circus music at all.
It's
like
boom, 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 boom. It's like
it's relentlessly happy. And you're like, I don't need this the entire time you're performing. I need like an ebb and flow here.
Motorcycles in chain ball in like balls in spheres. Where they go like vroom, 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 vroom,
you can do that.
vroom.
You can stack still. You can make human pyramids.
Yeah.
I do like the if you remember Sonic 3, the circus level. That's good music.
Yeah.
Which is basically the same song.
Yeah. But that's how it starts out, but then they change it.
Yeah, it gets different later, but you're like, okay, this fits.
Yeah.
So our topic this week is something I saw on an article a few weeks ago, and I thought to myself, at first I was like, not really, but the more I was kind of reading people's takes on it, there were some good opinions and bad opinions. I thought, this actually might make for some interesting fodder for the show. So if a half an hour from now we find it was horrible, then that's entirely on me. Or I'll blame Dave.
No, this guy right there.
Ah, damn it, he pointed at me. That means it's my fault. Shit. And that topic is this. Very simple, although we'll have to go into the layers of it, but on its surface, it's 4 basic words. Most famous person ever.
Ever.
Zelda.
Ever. In the history of the world, who is the most famous person to ever walk the planet?
Real person, not fictional, right?
Well, that's going to be one of the parameters that's going to affect one of the choices that I think is going to come up for this. So, yeah, that's part of the discussion, sure.
It depends on like how old you are, because my grandma would be like, Johnny Appleseed. Like, no, Grandma. He's dead.
No. So I've seen a lot of really bad takes, but like the one that I saw come up frequently was like Michael Jackson's the most famous person ever. I'm like,
that can't be true.
No, and I'm like, if you were born in 1965, sure, like he's super famous in America only. Like he was a worldwide sensation, but he's not the most famous person ever in the history of humankind.
I mean, even like as the years goes on, like people are like, Bruno Mars is the new Michael Jackson. They're like, who's Michael Jackson? Like, oh no.
If you think about it, he died almost 10 years ago now. And so there's a whole slew of kids, teenagers now that have never seen him alive, don't know really much anything about him except for he's that weirdo that had kids in his bedroom.
Yeah, and I think there's this America first element to this that we're also going to have to combat when we're talking about who's the most famous person in the world. Our views are obviously narrowed down to America overall. We'll take other stuff into consideration, but it'd be interesting just to kind of see what each country, for example, might consider the most famous person ever. Would they lean towards their own people more? Would they take a more globalist view? Because, yeah, I mean, the majority of the people we're going to bring up in this discussion, I imagine, are going to be primarily from America.
Well, and that's the problem. There's like this K-pop group where like they broke up, I guess, and like people around the world are like killing themselves, and I'm like, I've never even heard of this band. But they're probably, technically, depending on how you judge it, how many people know that this thing is a thing, more famous than like Justin Bieber, who is an American sensation for some of the wrong reasons and is known globally, but like you don't have people in the slums of like, I don't know, somewhere being like Justin Bieber, I love that guy.
It's so easy to forget the fact that America has 300-ish million people in it, and China has 1 billion, and India has 1 billion.
Yeah.
So we're actually pretty small portion of the world. So, I mean, we have a lot of influence, obviously, but America, as far as how many people there are, pretty small in comparison.
I don't even think Michael Jackson gets in my top 10.
Borderline. I mean, now, but maybe.
He might be on the cusp, but I don't think he makes the top 10. And I haven't made my top 10. I only have a few names in mind, and we'll see how the discussion goes, but I don't think he would make the cut. I don't think he's up there.
So here's what's interesting. Jesus, right? That's going to be at least a discussion point. It's on everybody's list, right? Here's the thing. Here's something I would challenge with Jesus. If we're saying name recognition, he's probably close to number one, if not number one. If we're talking about like people who actually know, I don't mean like biblically know, but can be like, oh yeah, I know like the story. I know whether you believe in the feats or not, I know what they are and can go into detail about them. Like George Washington. I know like 3 bullet points of George Washington.
But you know who he is.
Yeah, I know who he is. But like that's, I guess what I'm saying is like, is it just name? Or like what makes someone famous? Is it like you actually know them, you know what they accomplished, you know their feats, or like, no, yeah, I recognize that name.
So I would say that you have at least a name recognition and have like an instant idea of who the person was based on the name only is really, to me, what makes fame. Like Jesus, like you mentioned, most everyone in the world has a idea of who he was around when he lived. I mean, mostly because the calendar is based off of it, but that helps. And also just kind of a general idea of like, yeah, this is what this guy did. Even if it's a very vague amount, almost everybody knows that.
Dave, I'm going to interrupt this show right in the middle of it to suggest you might not have the right microphone selected.
Great.
Oh yeah, you sound like dog shit. Sorry.
Great, thanks for telling me.
Yeah, you go work on that while we discuss the point you just made. I do think there's an element of both.
Fixed.
That sounds much better. To Shaun's point, I think there's an element of both. And I think that's part of the discussion, too, is which one matters more. Like, a ton of people knowing the most basic detail about a given person because of their affectation to the world. Like, okay, Michael Jackson was a singer. How many people could actually name any of his songs? I mean, a lot of people could, no question. But there were some people who were just like, oh, yeah, he's that one singer, right?
Yeah.
Elvis Presley, again. Like, oh, yeah, he was that one sensation in America. The Beatles, whatever. Or is it more important that like you have a pretty basic understanding of them, even if they're not quite as widely known? Because the people who do know him can go like, oh, yeah, he did this, and he was responsible for that, and like he had an impact on history. You know, all these things are factors that I think matter.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that they do matter, because we're saying like most famous, not most like recognized. And like fame, there's things that come with fame, right? And so that's why. So I mean, you could still argue Jesus and Abraham Lincoln. Well, okay, but that's very American one. But you get what I'm saying, yes. Like. You could still say we know a lot about them, but there are some people. Michael Jackson, good example. Yeah, I know a few songs. Even I just could probably name like 4 or 5 songs, maybe more if I really thought about it. But
yeah. I mean, I put together kind of a list. I don't know if we want to kind of go through some lists.
Yeah, let's go. Let's destroy your list first.
Destroy it. Just
let's talk about it.
I mean, I don't sound terrible anymore, but my list might be.
Yeah,
that's true. I have my own list I'm going to present that you guys are going to love/hate. It's going to be great.
That's All right. So my number one was Jesus. Just, I mean, name recognition alone. Everybody knows who he is. A bit about him is like I don't know how anyone else could be more famous.
Jesus, Dave is still I was gonna say pocket Republican. That's not what closeted Republican. It's just the little things he does. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember.
I don't see how recognizing the
you don't see Dave.
No, I don't see how mentioning that the name Jesus is well known.
No, I'm just saying.
Now,
it's just like a working theory I have.
We have to acknowledge the elephant in the room on this.
Elephant. I see pocket Republican. Elephant.
Pocket circus performer. The elephant in the room on this is that Jesus might not have been real.
I mean, everything historically points to there was a person that lived around that time, whether his feats or not are real. But
that's a good question. So, like, where are we drawing the line? If there was a person named Jesus who happened to exist but did none of the things that he's credited for, I mean, is that famous, or is that he would be famous, but it's like...
I mean, as from some things that I've seen, I mean, there was a person who kind of helped start a new movement within Judaism. It was obviously hundreds of years later and many disciples and spreading of the word that created the Catholic Church. So it's a whole different story of like the validity of all the claims and everything like that. But I mean, there was a person who kind of got the ball rolling,
right?
And people may have. I
get what you're saying. Like, yeah, I to Chris's point though.
And I believe he existed, but there's definitely an element, a percentage, a not small percentage of the planet that doesn't believe Jesus existed at all. Mm-hmm. Now, I think, assuming that he did, this is a weird discussion in this framework, but like I think that probably is the number one. But when you have to consider the other factors, I don't know. And here's the other problem to that is that, okay, America is pretty Jesus-centric. We're Christian overall. We're founded on one nation under God, etc. But you made the India and China point earlier. So what about like the Prophet Muhammad?
Right. So I just thought about that. Here's the problem. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to sound like ignorant. The majority of people, if they know and really believe in Muhammad, they also know about Jesus. And, probably not a huge fan or whatever, but like, because it's not that Muhammad existed and Jesus didn't, right? They were both, even in the Quran, like there was a dude named Jesus, but.
I don't know that I actually don't know if Jesus gets mentioned in the Quran, because they're two different complete time frames. Muhammad is way before Jesus, I believe.
I thought I'm so sorry if I'm just like, I heard, and I don't know, maybe it's a bad source, that like there are references to Jesus, but like he's seen as not the true prophet, and at best and at worst like a false prophet. Maybe making this shit up. I don't know, but
no. To me, he was number 2 on the list, Muhammad. Because if you're going along those things, I mean, there is a lot of Islam, a lot of Muslim in the world, and Muhammad would be the following. So I think Jesus is more widely recognized, I think, but Muhammad's a close second.
I mean, it's interesting that religion is so dominant, but like you can't argue it. I mean, it's
historical. I mean, it goes back thousands of years. Like there is generations and hundreds of generations of people that have been raised on that, so you can't avoid it.
And the difference between that and other historical figures that we could mention, but I don't think are going to merit much consideration, like say a Julius Caesar, who has a month named after him, a salad named after him, is still referenced in modern time, is that there's not people like actively following Caesar. I mean, maybe there's some historians, but there's not an entire group of people devoted to following Caesar's teachings, whatever those would have been. Whereas the other like religious leaders endure because they still have millions and billions of people following their religions. It's also interesting because obviously Jesus is associated with Christianity, but there's some muddling in the water there as far as all the different branches of Christianity, some of which don't believe in Jesus. You mentioned, there's the whole Jewish faith that does not think that Jesus is really a thing because they just stick to the Old Testament. So all of that kind of muddies the waters, but I still think Jesus is a strong consideration for number 1.
So to back it up to my one point, and also to backtrack a little bit, they do the Quran. Now I don't know. Oh yeah, no. So the Quran mentions Jesus about 25 times, And most Muslims, according to a couple articles I just looked up, do believe that Jesus, this is what I really want to walk back, was a prophet who was given a special message to convey to people. So it's not even that he was this false bad dude. Okay. He was like a prophet, like the penultimate prophet.
And the consensus also seems to be, well, whether or not he was, the basically God incarnate in human form, he probably existed in that same manner you just mentioned, and you can still believe in that and not have the other stuff that contradicts it, like some of the Old Testament nonsense where people are like, yep, world's only 6,000 years old, as you can still believe in Jesus and not believe in that aspect of it, so it's complicated.
Yeah. So those are good first two. I still think my number one is number one, but I can't. Both of them were on my list as well. So
I'll go through 5.
Yeah,
if
sure.
That works for you. All right.
Keep
number
going.
3 I have is Hitler.
Okay.
Honestly,
yeah, that's
infamous,
my number one.
infamous, obviously. I mean, completely infamous. But I mean, he is synonymous with the word evil. It is as much as. It basically is, if you want to call someone a horrible insult, they're as bad as Hitler. That's just works. He's famous.
Yeah, I mean, my number one, even if you say it the deeds, you have to kind of know about them. It's most people know a decent amount about Hitler. It's taught a lot in school still. And even on the other side of it, Dave, you said either the criticism or if you make a joke, people know because he's so far on the one extreme.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he's seen as the ultimate evil.
Yeah.
In a way that no other despots really are.
Yeah.
People don't make Mussolini jokes,
which is
people bring
funny,
up Hitler all the time.
I mean, it's funny too because there's Stalin who killed tens of millions of his own people, but no one calls him out for it.
Comparatively, at least, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hitler, Stalin. Both bad, but Stalin, not as famous.
No,
Hitler.
I mean, he killed his own people. Hitler killed other people. Stalin killed his own people, so it's totally fine.
Yeah, right.
Of course, Holocaust deniers are not going to recognize Hitler as number one on our list.
But wouldn't they have to? Because it's still fame, even if they don't believe in it. Everyone recognizes it.
As odd as that is, that's the same argument we just made with Jesus. You don't have to believe it, but you still have to recognize that he's famous, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, but it could run into the same problem if they don't believe he actually did the things they did. But I'm not even going to go down this trail because he's so obvious. There's
Hitler
no
Jesus,
room.
Compare the two.
Yeah, there's no room for discussion there. Yeah, Hitler's terrible.
Yeah. Now to round out my 4 and 5. 4 is Albert Einstein. I
that's
think Einstein
a good
is
one.
Very famous for. Everyone knows. They might not understand what it actually means, and they have no, they don't understand the implications of it, but everyone knows E equals MC squared. It was just taught to all of us, and Einstein was the smartest man ever. So I think he's on worldwide level.
When you get reductive about everything, it's someone's really evil or bad or an asshole, they're Hitler. If someone's really smart, it's okay, Einstein.
Yeah, exactly.
And we just think in these the lowest hanging fruit possible.
Yep, I think that's when your name can become synonymous with an adjective, that you've hit a point of famous that no one else has.
And I think he was high up on my list. Again, it's difficult to kind of rank them necessarily, but he was probably my 3rd or 4th as well, just because of those same factors, because it's a question of how you endure. And it's difficult to figure out how that's going to happen with modern people who are still active. But even Michael Jackson, I mean, yes, his music lasts and people listen to it, but is that going to be the case in 100 years? I mean, maybe, but will it have an important effect on society in 100 years? I don't think so. But the theory of relativity, that's still a thing. That's important.
It's actually an interesting. I've always kind of wondered how it's going to be in the year 2050. How songs from 1950 that are now 100 years old are going to be looked at. Because when we were kids, songs that were 100 years old were 1890, and we were still basically in classical music at that point.
We're gonna get there with movies too, relatively soon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, depending on when you really consider okay, yeah, that was a moving picture, but a movie.
I mean,
what was the first official movie?
Well, I mean, that's the tough part. What is the first official movie? I mean, I'm gonna The Wizard of Oz, for example, that's a movie for sure.
Oh yeah,
and that was 1932.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. The 30s to 40s is
I mean, everything before that was basically Charlie Chaplin or bust.
At least Charlie Chaplin, there was a story. I know, the first movie was like a train going on screen. Like the end.
Whoa.
Which is cool at the time. Oh my God.
And you can make a case that for a very definitive window, Charlie Chaplin was probably the most famous person ever.
Yeah. You're right.
It might have only lasted like 5 to 7 years, but by God, everybody in this country probably knew him. But it doesn't last to now. He's not even in consideration. But that's the thing, is like how many of these things happening now are just flashes in the pan, and how many of them will last? And it's hard to say. Think about video games. I mean, the industry's been around since the late 70s. It really got popularized in the mid 80s. But the video game experience that we think of, like these really story-driven, heavy narrative stuff, is really only the last 10, 15 years. It's a very more recent pop culture endeavor than even movies or television or music. So how's that going to look in 100 years? I mean, God only knows. VR nonsense, probably.
I mean, and video games have changed the most in the shortest period of time. I would say
their rise has been meteoric compared to other mediums.
Yeah, comparatively. So yeah, that's interesting. When I think of Dave, talking about names being synonymous, I think dad bod. If someone has a dad bod, I'm like, that's Dave Robinson.
Come on, I don't even weigh 200 pounds.
Dad bod, dad bod can be anything now.
Yeah,
you can be a dad who's ripped, and like it's a dad bod still.
It used to be in its beginning. Dad bod was more about the bod. Now it's more about the dad.
yeah, right.
And that sounds like I'm just being cute with words, but it's actually true.
It is. Let's see. Number 5, to round it off, I put Gandhi as my number 5. Kind of newer, but still, I think very well known. Again, synonymous with like caring or passive aggressive, not passive aggressive, but like passive resistance, the way to be peaceful.
Which is so interesting because we kind of talked about this with the other candidates, but like Gandhi is already, I feel like in some ways starting to come to light of like, not maybe as good as he's heralded for. Things with some little girls, which I don't know, is weird, but it's not. We're not in like Harvey Weinstein territory, but I think it's interesting that like it's only, you think like maybe hundreds of years later, you find out more, but maybe that's the opposite. Maybe when that much time passes, they really just kind of like shift into legend, and it's only the good stuff that you remember. But
I think that's gonna be a huge part of it, is that after time, people maybe have discovered stuff and just not written it down or not widely spread it, and it gets forgotten, lost in time.
I think the basic question for me comes down to this: does it hit the right part of the world? And Gandhi does, because to me, what's the difference really between a Gandhi and a Martin Luther King Jr.? I mean, both were hugely important advocates in their own way, very passive in their approaches, like you mentioned. But hundreds of millions, if not billions, more people probably know Gandhi just because of his location versus MLK's. And I think that has to be part of the equation here. Some people might not take a math approach to it, but I think it kind of has to be.
Yeah. So that's my top 5.
So who's the weirdest person on your list then, Dave?
If I go down farther,
just the number one weirdest person.
Probably Walt Disney, because not so much that people know him, but they know what he made.
Yeah, I mean, his name carries something, and he deserves the lion's share of the credit for what was built out of it.
And you have Disney parks
everywhere. And he can fit on your list with Hitler.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Man, I hope that's not true.
I hope it's not true, too.
That was a Simpsons line where it's like, who has the so-called evil gene? Hitler had it. Walt Disney had it.
I don't even know if that's that weird. It's one where you have to kind of think about it for a half second. But when, again, like the man himself,
yeah,
he founded a big company and he started building a land named after himself because he was a fucking egomaniac. But his enduring legend, especially as Disney continues to acquire every other media on the planet,
they own everything.
Yeah.
Apparently, he was, and like it's kind of obvious, but like, it was him that generated so much of their like business acumen, and like he was brilliant with. I listen to this stupid Alexa thing every once in a while, and there's this guy who talks about like he worked for Disney, and there's a bunch of lessons, but the one I remember was like people kept cutting through like grassy areas of the park, and like the staff kept telling everyone to stop ruining the grass, and Walt Disney was like, no, like that's where they're walking, we need to accommodate that, so he had them actually like make a path that went through like the area that people were walking anyway. And it's like it's little stuff like that he was kind of a pioneer, and good for him, even though he's evil.
It's there's other little things I remember hearing, like there's not a more than I think 20 feet in between trash cans, because Walt was walking through the park one day and saw that that's about as far as people got with trash before they just threw it on the ground.
Yeah.
And so like there's trash cans like every 20 feet because they don't want litter on the streets.
They most of the time the park people is the last one I remember. They wanted to sell those maps. And Walt was like, absolutely not. I want people taking them home, putting them on their coffee table. When they see it, they remember how much of a good time they had. They want to come back. And I was like, dang.
I mean, I'm hooked. I love Disneyland. Disneyland's like my favorite place to go ever. I love it. I
can't do what I used to do, where I would go to Disneyland for like 5 days straight and ride like every ride 15 times. But like for a day or two now, I still love it.
I did 2 days with the kids last year, and it was amazing. I loved every moment of it.
Yeah.
Are you going to go back soon and see the new Star Wars land?
Oh, I have to. I think I'm hoping to go next in April for the kid's birthday. I'm hoping.
Heard it's pretty good, but...
Yeah, I really want to see it. And my son is obsessed with Star Wars.
Yeah,
so.
Darth Vader, which is, he might have the evil gene too. So.
Exactly. Well, he's Darth Vader for Halloween, so...
Yeah, well, be careful what you're raising, Dave.
I mean... He didn't kill his father. He didn't really have a father.
Yeah, he's also like 1 year old, so...
Ben Solo did kill his father, though, so...
Spoilers.
At least not Kylo Ren.
I'm just saying you have a bad egg.
It's a 4-year-old movie, Chris.
4-year-old kid, too, almost.
Almost.
You have a bad
Interesting.
Egg. You have a bad egg. Yeah, interesting. Interesting.
What came first, Dave?
Huh.
All right, Shaun, what's your list?
I don't have a list. I just want to like Hitler's my number one. That was the one where I'm like, man, this sucks to say, but if you're looking at like knowing who they are, but like beyond like just I've heard that name before. Like the atrocities he did. You know why he's an asshole. You know the Nazis. You know he was the head of the German state. So yeah, I mean Hitler.
All right, Chris, fine. What's your list?
I'll introduce some other names again. I don't have a list per se, but just some other ones I thought of. This is not really in my top 5, but it was somebody I thought of that I think is more famous than our generation is going to give credit to, and that's Marilyn Monroe.
That's hard, but like, is that one limited to America though? Again,
I don't know if it is entirely. Obviously, she's the most famous here, but I think she had worldwide appeal. Not enough to crack the top 5 again, certainly, but I think that's a name that kind of gets slept on as far as like. There's probably a 10 or 15 year span at the peak of her career where she was then at least. Now, I mean, again, her lasting impact doesn't endure as well, but I think one name that we haven't mentioned that is probably a borderline top 5 is Mother Teresa.
I had her on my list.
Oh, God, yeah. That one kind of starts fading, though, as time goes on now, too, unfortunately.
Now that she died, yeah.
But, yeah that's a good one.
Not as I don't think she holds up as well as some of the other ones we've mentioned who are more humanitarian, but I think she's definitely top 10.
Dude, she was cool.
Yeah. One that is on my list that I wonder how much worldwide appeal this has. This is American appeal to everyone, but I don't know how much worldwide appeal, and it's George Washington. Just everyone in America knows who he is and about him.
Well, if you're asking people in other countries to name presidents, there's only 2 they're going to name for sure, right? Washington and Lincoln, and maybe the current one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like those 2 are. If you're going to name a president, I think those 2, Washington and Lincoln, have to be at least up there, even worldwide. Yeah. Some people would have hated them because of their effect on global politics. Some people would have loved them for their effect on it. But I mean, I think they're up there for sure. I don't know if I don't know if either's top 5. I almost think Lincoln might be higher than Washington. But
that's crazy to me.
I think they're both top 10.
You know, we never had a George Washington movie. Where's Daniel Day-Lewis at Washington?
Yeah, where's George Washington, werewolf killer? We had Abraham Lincoln, vampire hunter.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is it? All we have is he chopped down the apple tree.
I mean, he's already got the axe to chop down the werewolves.
Yeah, I know.
I just feel like if you ask people around the world, I have nothing to base this on, but just a feeling. If you ask people around the world what president they knew, it'd probably be Lincoln because he had those like characteristics that people might recognize, like the big hat and the black outfit and the beard and all that stuff. Where Washington, what did Washington have? Not telling a lie.
The hair. I mean, the hairstyle of the time
wig
and
with the curls.
Yeah, right.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Lincoln got assassinated.
True.
Sucks for him, but it probably helped to make him a little more famous.
They're both on multiple pieces of currency, but most people outside of America aren't going to care about that.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyways, I think those 2 need to be up there. I said Mother Teresa.
You said Marilyn Monroe. That reminds me of like Hugh Hefner. Like he's somewhat famous.
Isn't he more American? I mean,
Probably,
you're right,
but like I don't know.
But...
I would say I don't know the impact of Playboy globally would be my question, and maybe it's non-existent, but I could see because it was so important is maybe the wrong word. But like,
it was groundbreaking.
Yeah, right. Okay, groundbreaking. Yeah, and so like, did that expand to on a global level? I don't know, but.
I don't know. There's certain countries that you'd be literally killed for having it. So
that's why it was. Yeah, no, I know.
And the interesting thing now is just to see how much his name endures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one that I think was either would be my fifth or sixth if I went to rank them. That might surprise you a bit, but I think when you consider the body of work, you might agree with me. Muhammad Ali.
Easily the most famous boxer. He's probably the only boxer a lot of people can name.
Probably.
Mike Tyson.
There's a few others. Tyson, maybe George Foreman. There's a couple others that would be up there, but definitely the most famous boxer by far. But consider what he did for his own advocacy for Islam.
Mm-hmm.
So not just his presence in America, he also fought around the world on multiple occasions and was a huge advocate for the Islamic faith. I think he might actually be that high.
Yeah. You're not wrong. I didn't think of him because I don't know. For me, just the personal anecdote, I grew up hearing about Muhammad Ali all the time. And I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Like, 6 years old. He has done boxing. I had no idea who he was when I was a little kid. And it was almost annoying how much people talked about him. It's like, I don't know who this is.
Man, and then you bring that up, like, Michael Jordan was, like, huge. He doesn't have the same, like, layer that Muhammad Ali does where, like, there's a faith element, too.
And a political one, yeah. But still.
Michael Jordan, though, was, like, a household name, like, around the world. It was crazy.
He was as hot as a name could be in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're pushing into for that period of time. He might have been the most famous person in the world for that period of time.
Yeah, especially as the Dream Team took form. Because that had a global stage where other people had to be like, well, let's watch this really good basketball player whoop our country's ass by 60.
Yeah, I have to think.
Country.
Yeah.
Now it is faded where, like, if you're at all aware of sports, you know Michael Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if these, like, Gen Zers are going to automatically know Michael Jordan if they don't have an interest in sports.
He doesn't even do Hanes commercials anymore. He's just the owner of the Hornets.
They're too busy talking about killing themselves to watch basketball.
No, he doesn't. Once again, tying our top 10 to Hitler. Everything comes back to Hitler, so Shaun might be right about his number one.
That's probably right.
Great.
Well, all the Gen Zers think that LeBron is better anyway, and they're not wrong. But anyway, moving on.
LeBron has to be mentioned in consideration for, like, top 20. Maybe top 25.
Ever?
Maybe.
It's because basketball is so big.
It's such a big global phenomenon now, and his brand, he's done a very good job cultivating it to where I have to think, again, he's not anywhere near the top 10, but...
So, like, what about, like, Pele? Not, like, it's almost the opposite, where, like, he's known throughout the world and probably less in America.
He's one that permeated into America, though.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that.
Yeah. But if you name a soccer player, anybody... our age or older is going to say Pele first for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe now somebody's like a Ronaldo or a Lionel Messi, but
Beckham maybe,
especially in Europe. But yeah, I think it's pretty much Pele. And since soccer is so big globally, I feel like he might be like top 15-ish, top 20-ish.
Yeah, it gets hard because like now I wasn't even thinking about sports. I'm like, yeah, sports is.
I mean, if you go off of the worldwide most famous ever and has longer lasting power, I mean, Pele actually might be higher than Michael Jordan.
Maybe
for long.
I think
so. Could be.
I don't think it's close.
But if you look at these like pillars of like most famous, you either go like ultimate good or evil, sports, religion,
pop culture,
and then pop culture. We haven't done like a lot of though. Like who's like a movie star? You said Marilyn Monroe.
I mean, Tom Hanks is really up there.
Globally, really though,
top
like
50, maybe.
I mean, he can't be the top of the movie stars globally known.
I don't even know if he's the top most known in America, which makes it tough to rank him globally. I don't know who is. I'm kind of trying to think about that now.
I'm trying to think like a Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Or like
Tom Cruise.
Everybody knows Tom Cruise. He's been in movies for a century.
And we know movies obviously have their own market overseas. Maybe sometimes America's the biggest, but we talk about global box office receipts. So there's definitely a market for that elsewhere. And I think those big time like male leads, unfortunately, are probably among the people that are going to be watched the most. Because in some countries around the world, you're not allowed to be in a movie if you're a woman.
Yeah, right.
The WWE goes back to Saudi Arabia twice a year to get blood money because they're paying them huge amounts to bring their aging stars over that people recognize. Women aren't allowed to wrestle there in 2019.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it has to be a male star, unfortunately. But I think Tom Cruise might be the biggest one, at least globally.
But then that's like hard because like I'm sure
Weird.
there's like some Bollywood star who like I've never heard of, but he's huge. But I'm like, well, that doesn't count if no one in America knows him. Then it's like, but like probably 3 billion people do. So it gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
Which is why we can't weigh the world too heavily.
Yeah.
I mean, you almost can't. We don't know enough.
Well, we're just dumb Americans. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, we try. We're trying to be aware. We're saying like, we're not saying I don't know, Ariana Grande is the most famous person in the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
I guess one that is another American centric is recent presidents. We're gonna like Obama and stuff like that. I feel like he is super well known across the world, but I don't know for sure it's gonna stand the test of time. I mean, right now, super famous. I don't know if it's gonna last though.
I mean,
yeah, I don't.
In America, it certainly will. First African American president, it's gonna last. Around the world, though, I don't know.
I mean, if we go back, I start getting fuzzy before, like, let's see, George H.W. Bush, a little bit. I do all right. But, like, before Nixon?
Reagan was before.
Reagan, okay. Everybody knows Reagan. Well, then before Reagan.
Ford.
Where was JFK?
Oh, sorry, Carter.
60s.
Then
So
JFK
that's my
60s.
point, though, is like
that's
Carter.
as far back as I go.
Okay,
I can go back to Kennedy, and then it's a mess.
No clue. So,
Eisenhower.
I mean, we'll have to see in the next 30 years or so.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton might endure because of the scandal, so that's not the best. Even then, I think maybe not.
And I could name more presidents from even right before Kennedy. I just don't know if I could do them in order anymore.
Yeah.
And then by the end,
that's
like
fair.
before World War I don't even know if I could name more than like
Nah.
8 to 10 of them.
I mean, Trump is so
1800s.
polarizing. That one might last.
He's rising up the ranks. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's too hard to judge his full body of work until he's out of the office, which is either going to be in a year or 5 years.
You know, like Andrew Jackson
9
was an
years.
idiot, and I know his name. I don't think he's renowned worldwide.
I
The
know.
guy just
James-
had parties all the time.
I know James Polk because of They Might Be Giants.
I don't.
Look it
what
up.
You just said was gibberish. to me.
Nope.
I know. I'm trying to fill in for Michelle. That's not even that obscure of a group, but
I knew of James K. Polk because of his presidency, not because of They Might Be Giants.
But that's like you know more president. You and probably. I mean, you guys went to Brophy, so like you learned
Sure.
presidents. I never learned the presidents, so I
remember
had to
what
put it
the
together myself. I'm self-taught, and I only know like 5.
public school asshole.
I think Obama might be top 25 to top 30-ish. This, again, is all time, so it's really tough to go higher than that. And that's only going to decrease because I'd like to think that there's going to become a point where the president is going to be the president regardless of race or gender, and it's going to become commonplace to have these more off-the-wall picks by traditional measures.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that, but who knows?
I agree. Let's get a good one.
Every
Yeah,
time I
let's-
turn around, politics
let's
keeps
hope.
disappointing me.
Obama's not the only African American president we've ever elected.
Because
That would be awful.
when Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders is running against Donald Trump, we're going to be right back to where we started again.
Old white man.
The only way that's okay is if like the Earth explodes in the next like 4 years, which is really not good, but for other reasons.
I feel like we should talk more frequently about the fact that like Congress is still something like 85% male.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you fix that. I know there's efforts to do so, but it's like, the women are more than half the planet. So it doesn't really make sense that we still have this archaic representation in our most important governing bodies.
Yeah. As they die off, that'll kind of change.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
Oh,
say.
no.
They have to
Term
like
limits.
age. Yeah, they have to age out of it, and then
Yeah. With no term limits, they just keep getting reelected. I mean, so many people in Congress, especially, run unopposed,
Yeah.
and nobody even tries. So
Like how long was Strom Thurmond in the Senate? Like 87 years?
it's insane. It's stupid.
I mean, the young Republicans of America are trying, their best, but they can only do so much. Dave is a chapter leader with that organization, but
Shit.
he's
So
told me
don't
their
out him.
struggles in secret.
I'm going to throw you a
Look,
few
we're
more
not
names.
evil. We're not Hitler.
I would let me throw a few more puzzlers at you just for kind of like rapid fire. I think none of these are top 5 candidates, but just for consideration. If the Beatles were one person, where would they rank for you?
Top 10.
Pretty
Higher
high.
than Michael Jackson, probably, right?
Pretty
Yeah, I
high.
would.
They're so like effusive. And
I can't think of another band that's even close.
Worldwide,
Rolling
global.
Stones.
I mean, the Stones, sure, but like I don't think they had the worldwide effect the Beatles did. I could be wrong, but to me, I don't think that's even close.
I feel like I don't hear this a lot. Maybe I don't know enough about them, but like the Beatles are renowned because they were famous, but also like you go back and you're like, oh yeah, this musical technique pioneered by the Beatles.
Yeah.
And like everything is like pioneered by the Beatles. Rolling Stones, I'm sure there's something they did, but like I don't. Oh shit! I don't hear it to that effect.
Earthquake.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, the Beatles pioneered and were like led the way, and we still use the same tactics today as far as mixing music and production of music. They changed the world. They changed music production completely.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah.
So if you consider that one person, they might be barely top 10 to me. I do think it's interesting. Maybe some other day for our show we tackle this. Instead of being like the most famous ever, what if you just did it like that? You know, some places do an elimination style format where it's like one person's king until someone else dethrones them. Because then you could talk about somebody who was the most famous person for even just a year or two. The Beatles probably owned like a decade.
Yeah.
The 60s.
And they still endure pretty well today. So I think it's pretty easy inclusion for like a 9th or 10th type spot.
Yeah.
Some other names I think weren't mentioning, but I don't especially care about are like Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
Is probably top 15-ish.
Man, that one's unfortunately it's already faded so bad with this generation.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill, I think, would be top 20-ish.
Yeah.
Up there. FDR, same but breath.
Now, here's one I think is funny, and I'm interested to see what you think. Christopher Columbus.
I was going to mention him.
God, you talk about someone getting famous for all the wrong reasons.
I know. It's interesting because the fame has twisted to infamy, and yet how many people could name him before maybe half the people we've mentioned so far today?
Yeah.
Do you remember how they taught him to you when we were like 7? Especially, I mean, when we were young, it was the 500th anniversary in 1992.
Yep.
And so there was like, he was revered. He was like,
a hero.
Look at this guy. He sailed across this land and found this
He
new
was so
country.
brave.
Yeah, so brave. Didn't know it was hitting. Like, I was taught that he was this hero. I know that the backlash is now pushed into like this other side where it's like he's the most evil person ever, in which it's a little more towards the middle, but it's interesting how that's changed so quickly.
Well, it's kind of a bummer because what he did was somewhat important, even if it was a little bit misguided and not exactly what we thought he did. I think it's interesting because you can't really say what he did at the time was as bad as it seems to be now. I'm not saying it was good. I'm just saying that we judge it more harshly because of the extra information we have. And going off of what you knew in that era, I don't think it would be considered the same way, even if you had the complete picture then. That's all.
I mean, it's tough, and it's wrong. I mean, it's wrong, but like if someone comes across and sees another group of people and doesn't look at them as people, do they think they're doing something wrong?
This is going to be a really bad example, but what if somebody who owned slaves in the 1800s would never have done that in 2019?
Yeah.
I don't know what that means or anything. I'm just saying, like, things change, people's mindsets change, and we can't really know how someone would have reacted in a different era. We have to only base them on the context that we have. I'm not going to become a Christopher Columbus apologist. I'm just saying it's a little weird that, again, he went, like you said, from, like, revered to absolutely scorned.
I mean, his accomplishments were extremely important. I mean, it started the colonization of the New World. He wasn't necessarily the first one to get there, but he's certainly the first one that stayed.
What about Nelly? Every time I have a fever, I get "it's hot in here" stuck in my head. That means something, right?
All right, get out. Out.
What if you combined every pope into one pope?
Way up there. I mean, throughout history. I mean, the Pope in the 1300s is the most influential person in the world, basically.
Oh, yeah, that's true. If we were saying ever, you got to give extra weight.
All the popes.
Yeah.
Again, it's back to that religious front, but I think that might be like a 4th or 5th candidate if you really combine them into one pope.
Yeah.
You know, even if you say who was the most famous pope of the popes during that time, that's probably pretty huge because just how influential that religion is.
If you had to pick one, it's probably John Paul II, but I don't know if he cracks top 50. Maybe just because of how wide Catholicism is spread around the world, but
that's our 20th century birth.
Probably.
You know.
How evil do you think the Pope was in the past?
I mean,
we had to have had some evil popes, right? I think our Pope
Absolutely.
now is pretty cool, but
some popes that are like, this place has infallibility in the eyes of everyone. So if I do it, I'm not wrong.
I just think I've seen too many movies to not believe one of the popes was evil.
Yes, there was one.
One of them had to slip through. Yeah.
I think this pope is pretty cool though.
I like this pope a lot.
Better than Benedict.
It's funny. My like of the pope increases as the Catholic Church's like of the pope decreases. That probably says something.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make of that, but
let me rattle off some names that I think are in the same category, just to get your guys' thoughts. Da Vinci, Van Gogh, Picasso, Beethoven.
Beethoven, I would say.
Beethoven's the biggest.
Yeah.
I'd say Da Vinci's the biggest on out of that
Mozart.
list.
Any other like influential Renaissance type era, like turn of the centuries type big names?
Might be bigger than Beethoven.
I don't know.
That's hard. I'm not as musically inclined as you guys. So
maybe. I mean, I think as far as contributions to music, yes. Global recognition, I think, is Beethoven first, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, they're pretty close. I would say Mozart by a hair, but I don't think you're wrong for saying Beethoven. So,
John Elway, good old American. That's the problem. Football. Who is the most famous football player ever? Dan Marino, John Elway?
Joe Montana. Maybe.
Joe Montana is huge.
I mean, it almost
Tom
has
Brady.
to be a quarterback.
Yeah, Tom Brady now. I mean, honestly.
I don't even know. Football players just don't have that same level of fame as other athletes because they have the helmet on.
Because they have the helmet on. That's what people say a lot.
Power.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they die too quickly.
Yeah.
And the commissioner has killed their social media.
But
their marketability, he's just tanked it.
But it's interesting because we had this conversation about the GOAT, and you can make a few cases in basketball. Is there anybody who really argues Wayne Gretzky in hockey?
No.
I've seen somebody be like Bobby Hull or something. It's like, get the fuck out of here.
I can name one hockey player.
Like Mario Lemieux was just a not quite as good Wayne Gretzky. And he was awesome, but it's Wayne Gretzky.
Give me the second most famous hockey player.
Bobby Orr, maybe. Mario Lemieux is way up there.
You would say Bobby Orr. I say the guy from The Waterboy.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, Gordie Howe. Gordie Howe
probably
Gordie Howe. Never heard of it.
Yeah.
So like Wayne Gretzky, and that's it. But like Wayne Gretzky, like really high. Like I definitely know who he is, and I've never heard of anyone else in hockey.
Who's the most famous golfer of all time?
Tiger Woods.
Without a doubt.
Jack Nicklaus is.
Yeah, he's close. And you can argue about who's better, and I don't even care about that discussion, but who's the most famous just because of the sensation that he was? It's Tiger, and it's not close.
Oh, this one's interesting. Tennis. Interesting one
geez.
for this one.
I think the most famous tennis player of all time is Martina Navratilova.
Okay. Well, you went with a woman, which was like my first gotcha.
Rita.
But you went there. I would go with the Williams. I don't know which one maybe, but like they were everyone knows
Serena.
the sisters.
Yeah.
And yeah.
If you combine them into one, it would help their rankings a little bit, but I think just because of how she's endured, Serena has to be, and she's been more of a lightning rod for criticism. Some fair, some not.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I don't know. Sampras was way up there in fame.
Sampras was up there, but he always had Agassi as a foil. Like the two of them are sort of joined at the hip in a similar ways, like Jimmy Connors and John McEnroe were.
And Federer and Nadal nowadays.
Yeah, and Djokovic now is right there with them too.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's kind of tough too because there's not really like one. You can maybe even have to go like back more, or you could also argue, God, what the hell is Billie Jean King?
Oh, yeah.
Billie Jean King, yeah.
You could make the case for her, if only because of the outside of tennis effect that she had.
What about Martina Hingis?
No. What about Jennifer Capriati?
What about that one that was really hot that now I'm proving that she's not famous? Anna Kournikova.
Anna Kournikova has not endured.
No. Endured more for off the tennis court than on.
That's correct.
So that's too bad.
Basically, as she's gotten old, no one cares about her anymore, which is a sad commentary, but an accurate one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is the most famous figure skater of all time?
Nancy Kerrigan. In my heart. Michelle Kwan is playing way up there.
Yamaguchi is. I think it's Nancy Yamaguchi.
Yamaguchi, yeah.
Christy Yamaguchi.
Christy, that's what it's. Yeah.
But you have to consider Tanya Harding, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's infamous, but yeah.
I know. It's the same type of problem, right?
Yeah.
I was so mad because I was like telling her she took out Michelle Kwan's knee, and that wasn't right. Who was it? Whose knee did she bash in?
Tanya Harding took out Nancy Kerrigan.
It was Kerrigan, and I was like, I bet Maisie like $50 that it was Michelle Kwan.
Michelle Kwan.
So, yeah.
Anyway. It's interesting because I think for athletes to really transcend and reach this top 25 even, and I don't think almost any of them would in our list, they have to do something else. Even if they're a transcendent athlete, there has to be more to it than that. Yeah. Even like a Wayne Gretzky, who was by far the most famous and best hockey player, he had video games, he had endorsement deals, he had a hot daughter. You know, there's other things that he's done that make a difference.
What is it like Michael Jordan, though, like, is almost known just because of how prolific he was. Maybe you could say the deal with Nike and like the commercials.
Deal with Nike was it.
I mean, the guy won 6 championships in 8 years. Yes. Like, I think that has something to do with it too.
Oh, of course it does. But the fact is, they created his own brand. The Jumpman logo was created for him. It was his athletic accomplishments that started it, but Nike pushed it into the stratosphere.
Yeah, when I think about how many people are wearing Jordan kicks and don't even know who Jordan is.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's changing rapidly. It wouldn't have been the same 10 years ago even because, he was playing until like 2002 or so. But, boy.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any other interesting... Oh, there was one other one I was going to bring up just in the same vein as Einstein, although I don't think it's as high, which is Thomas Edison.
I would think...
Shit on now.
I'm with you, except Benjamin Franklin is the one that's a little more like the dude.
That. And Edison and Franklin are both very America-centric, again, in ways that Einstein wasn't necessarily, which also hurts them, but they might be top 25-ish.
Well, America invented the light bulb, the TV...
widespread obesity,
drones. I don't know who invented what, to be honest. Benjamin Franklin had a lot to do with electricity, right?
Yes, he did.
You'll notice we haven't even mentioned any like authors. Hemingway,
Hemingway, that other guy. I mean,
Stephen King.
Yeah.
Hemingway, yeah.
J.K. Rowling.
In a way, yeah, but in a sad way.
Authors don't really get fame in the traditional sense because they're generally kind of behind-the-scenes folks. Not always, but it's kind of sad that one of our better branches of culture is almost forgotten in this discussion because
it's so sad.
Who cares?
Well, it's more about the story. Is that they put themselves into the story, but their name isn't always in the story. Their name's on the cover, but you don't always remember who that is. I mean, who wrote Gone with the Wind? Who wrote Catcher in the Rye? People know, but not everybody does.
I don't know the answer to either of those questions, Dave.
Catcher in the Rye? Come on. Chris?
He's the English major. I'm blanking on it.
J.D. Salinger.
I wouldn't have gotten there.
I don't know if I've ever heard that name before. See, Chris was at least close. I was in another stratosphere.
So if it wasn't a president, I think the person that America would most overrate in this discussion, considering the global impact, is Neil Armstrong.
Yeah.
I could see that.
We would think he's higher up than most of the rest of the world would, even though I think there's some recognition there. We'd be like, oh, yeah, he went to space, so like everybody knows him. It's like, they had their own astronaut programs in a lot of countries. Probably not.
But we were first. America's first.
Well, not the first to space.
We were the first to space. We were the first to the moon. We were the first to Mars.
All right, one last one I want to bring up because we're almost at the end here, and we've already kind of put our best candidates 20 minutes ago, but I think Dave mentioned this before the show, and I think it's a weird one that I've seen in people's lists. Do you give any credit to Amelia Earhart?
Credit.
As far as, like, in the discussion, like...
Oh, okay.
For being a pilot who crashed and was never found and became something of a worldwide sensation at that time, and she's still referenced today in some small circles. Where does she even go? Certainly not like top 10 or anything, although I've seen that from people, but like she has to be somewhere in the discussion, right?
She's like the secondary tier, like Joan of Arc was like, she's pretty famous. I definitely heard that name. I can't tell you a lot of details though. That's like the more like name recognition where like I probably can't tell you. She was famous for like an airplane. She tried to go around the world and
No, just the Atlantic Ocean.
Did it, or she succeeded maybe. We don't know. We never found her.
Yeah. Actually, I did have one last one
out there.
I did have one last one that we didn't bring up that I think is super. I wonder how worldwide famous it is.
Okay.
Shakespeare.
Oh God, that's way up there.
Yeah, that's probably
that's way up there.
15 to 10.
We talked about authors. He's number one on the author for sure.
Yeah, it's just but he's in English, and his English writing does not translate well to other languages because of the rhyming, the pace. everything like that, I don't think it would translate that well to other languages. You can, but I don't think it loses so much of it. So I don't know how well he translates to other languages.
And yet his effect on English as a whole, and even just some of the aphorisms we use endures to this day.
Mm-hmm. It's true. But
To
it is
this day.
kind of an English-speaking centric thing.
Yeah, I don't. You know, that's a good point. I don't know if they're like, but like Romeo and Juliet is like so timeless that like I guarantee you there is a Bollywood version of Romeo and Juliet.
Absolutely. there
So-
is, yes.
I don't know. Do they credit Riche? Is he even in the discussion on the Bollywood adaptation?
It's in the public domain. It doesn't matter.
Well, maybe they hit touch on him in the musical number at the end. I don't know, but yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
He's up
I mean,
there.
He's way up there,
Like-
but it is again English-centric.
Wild goose chase is a Shakespeare phrase.
Oh man, we could do this all day.
Oh, yeah.
All that glitters is not gold is not a Smash Mouth lyric. It's a
So
Shakespeare
that is-
phrase.
all that glitters is gold.
Right, but still,
Rose and Thorns. That's him, right?
break
That's
the
it.
ice. I think is attributed to Shakespeare.
Yeah,
There's some
so
others I'm
many.
not thinking of. Yeah, I mean that might even be top 10. That's probably top 10.
yeah.
Here's what's interesting. I pulled up a list just to kind of get some other ideas that I might have forgotten about. There are 127 names on this list, and Shakespeare is not one of them. So we're not the only ones to potentially overlook his meaning, even though a lot of us are sort of Englishly oriented in nature here.
I'd be interested in the rest of the list to be like, did we just like, maybe the list is great and we screwed up, but
I don't know how you don't put Shakespeare on that
in the
list.
discussion, yeah.
George Clooney is on this list.
No, okay.
Kylie Minogue is on this list.
Okay.
come on.
William
all right.
Shakespeare is not on this list. The Wright
That's
brothers are on this list. That's an interesting one.
Was this list
Fair.
written in like the heart of like summer of 1996?
Yeah, I know,
Kylie Minogue.
Wright brothers also very America-centric, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
Bill Gates is on a list that I have here, which is
Oh.
like okay.
I
famous.
saw him on one, yeah.
You have to have Zuckerberg has to like kind of be in that conversation,
He's
right?
up.
We'll
Like,
see how he lasts, if Facebook can survive another few years.
Yeah.
I thought maybe that who was it? Oh yeah, Charles Darwin's an interesting one. I
Darwin,
don't
yeah.
top 30
Oh,
or so
yeah.
maybe, but all right. So what are we settling on? Are we settling on Jesus? Is that the winner?
No, Hitler. My vote's Hitler. You
Uh,
guys might both vote Jesus. I think you did both vote Jesus as your number
Yes.
one. So
Jesus
I
is
don't know.
my number one.
The more we mentioned Hitler in conjunction with other people in the top 25, the more it started to make me wonder.
But Jesus has 2,000 years. Hitler's got 100.
I mean, and that's where you really get into the specifics of, technically speaking, Jesus by default, because he's had more time, he has more
Actually,
recognition.
2,000 years.
Yeah, I mean that's fair.
And Hitler was the embodiment of sin to remind us why we might need a second coming of Jesus.
Okay.
And Einstein wouldn't have had his brains without Jesus.
Or Hitler,
Oh,
because they're no,
ouch.
like
Tough now.
like would Einstein's achievements have been as influential if it wasn't for the extreme fucking evil that Hitler brought? You know what I mean?
I mean, he left Germany because of it. So yeah, I mean, he was definitely influenced.
And he made the nuke, and like a lot of people know that. Like he's
Yeah.
famous for that.
Yep.
But how can Edison be famous for a light bulb if God gave the universe light to begin with?
Okay, now you're just
Paltry in
spouting.
comparison.
I don't know. But that's a distinction. Most famous ever, like now, or like most famous ever as in ever. Like if you gauge every period in history and ask them, then it gets really hard because then you ask like the caveman, like who's the most famous person? He's like Bob next door.
And he's probably not going to say Hitler because he hasn't been born yet.
Yeah,
So it probably doesn't help your cause any, no.
Bob made the wheel.
Yeah, Grog invented fire.
Fire good.
Most famous person, my wife. He's dragging her
And my
by the
other
hair.
wife.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to stick with Jesus, but Hitler's probably my number 2 now. I might even
Yeah.
have him above Muhammad.
Yeah.
Haven't decided
And-
yet.
Yeah.
So you swayed me a little bit, Sean, but not enough.
Okay,
We've got that.
that's
I
okay.
mean, our top two most famous people are the embodiment of good and the embodiment of evil.
Yeah, it's pretty opposite. But that's, I mean, I think that says something, right?
Yeah, it
It
does.
says something. I don't know what, but it definitely says something.
It's
Yeah.
a polarizing world we live in.
Like if
That's what
Mother
it says.
Teresa wasn't known as like the most compassionate person ever. And I don't even know how much of that is true. Probably a lot, but like I feel like what we remember her as, like the embodiment of an angel, is like probably overstating. Almost has to be. But I mean that's what we like latch onto It's like these pure manifestations of either good or evil.
Mm-hmm.
Which is exactly the opposite of what this show is supposed to be about.
I know.
Whoops.
We also said Michael Jordan, though. He's the pure embodiment of
an asshole.
Dave would say asshole. I agree with you, Dave. Competitive spirit. Chris. I agree with you, Chris. I disagree with Dave. Well, maybe not.
I mean, they're kind of synonymous, competitive spirit and asshole. Sometimes the competitive person is really an asshole. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
That's why the Kobe comparisons to him endured.
Yeah.
And
Kobe's an asshole.
They were both hugely competitive in ways that LeBron really isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. We talked about basketball anyways, and I told you that might happen.
God damn it!
Right back around to it.
I knew either Jordan or LeBron was going to come up at some point during this, so that's why I said in the beginning it might happen. But you made it to the end. You did okay there, kid. So that's the end of this.
Sorry, Chris, I'm running over here. If you have your most famous candidate that you didn't hear mentioned, write the show at
and here.
Any of those things. We won't check it, but you'll feel good for doing it.
So that's the end of this episode. In between shows, you can find us at the places Dave just pointed to at the bottom of the screen, on ObjectionNetwork.com, on @TeamObjection if we bother to update it ever again. It's YouTube.com/ObjectionNetwork for new videos 7 days a week. And finally, send emails to the show to do what Shaun told you to do at ObjectionNetwork@gmail.com. See you next time.